Once again, if you guys like the content that we provide, to be sure to subscribe today to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming content. We just wrapped up the Route 66 Nationals yesterday from Joliet, Illinois, or Chicago, depending on however the hell you want to call it. I do not know why that was an argument in the comment section last night. We are now live here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on, be sure to subscribe to the channel, brought to you by our friends at Peak Performance. Look down in the link below so you can go support them. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So after a hectic weekend of qualifying for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500, we have just wrapped up the 2-hour Monday practice session here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And usually a day that is pretty calm and non-eventful as everybody just kind of gets ready for Sunday's race. This is probably one of the biggest breaking headlining stories of the entire month, and probably one of the biggest stories surrounding the 500 in the last 10 years. Tell us what in the hell is going on over here.
So we talked about this in yesterday's recap video about the controversy with Team Penske getting ejected from the Fast 12 qualifying, and we have a little bit more clarity about what that is. And overnight, so let me back up. Last night I said that there probably won't be repercussions until after the 500. That is completely wrong now, because there was some pretty hefty penalties handed out this morning from the IndyCar Series towards Team Penske. Now, for the violation itself, it involved basically sanding down the surface of the rear attenuator, the rear crash structure that the rear wing sits on and where it connects to the car, and replacing the mandated OEM surface with a kind of synthetic, different surface.
With resin.
Yeah, with a resin surface to it that would reduce drag and save just the tiniest amount of weight to the cars. And kind of the biggest revelation to come out of this today is this isn't the first year this has happened. This has been something that they did last year as well. It was Racer.com's Marshall Pruett that pointed this out this morning when during the press conference when Doug Bowles, the president of the IndyCar Series and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, was announcing his penalties for the Team Penske, that multiple teams had come forward saying that they have photos of those cars in testing here back in April and last year's month of May of those cars with the same rule violation, but it was not caught then. And a lot of people have been going to the museum taking a look at Josef's winning car from last year, and sure enough, it has it. And then we've been looking through photos as well of the other two Penske cars of Scott McLaughlin and Will Power, and sure enough, those cars had it.
So this is a massive penalty that has shaken the entire IndyCar world, if not the IndyCar world, the entire racing world. Everybody from every corner of the globe is really commenting on this, because especially after last year's push-to-pass penalty, this race a year ago is really what kind of put those penalties behind them, because now everybody was able to say, okay, even without the push-to-pass penalty, Josef Newgardens can still win this race. But now we are finding out they cheated with that win again. Even if, people are going to sit here and say in the comments, oh, what benefit is it really going to have? Elio Castroneves said in his post-race press conference here today after practice that the only reason he thinks of why Roger would do this is because he wants to make the cars look prettier. Well, no team in their right mind is going to spend money on a product to apply to their race cars, every single one of them, if they don't think there's a performance advantage that comes with it. They don't care about whether or not it's going to make the car look prettier. They want to know if it's going to make the car look faster. NASCAR did this with the Daytona 500 cars back in the 2000s when we were in the Aero Wars with the Gen 4 cars, and we're seeing it now here in IndyCar. You have a spec chassis, spec cars, spec parts. This is what's going to happen. So I have no doubt in my mind that if Penske did not see a performance advantage with these cars, they would not have gone to the length that they had to make sure every single car has had it. And like you said, yeah, Josef Newgarden and you have Will Power being moved to the back of the grid after supposedly needing to start, I believe, 9th and 10th and 11th. Now, we just saw the Penske cars rolling down to the end of the grid, and honestly, Scott McLaughlin's probably shaking his head saying, thank God I flipped this car and backed it into the wall, because or else he'd be right down there with him.
So I want to make a couple of points. So last year is when all of this really began. That part has become pretty evident now, looking back at photos from last year and photos of the rear attenuators from this year. It's not usually a heavily photographed part of the car. If it was the front wing and something with wickers on the front, okay, because everybody takes pictures of the front and the sides of the car. The other bit to it is last year was the introduction here of the newer elongated crash structure at the back of the car, that attenuator. It used to be a lot shorter, but for safety purposes, they did elong that for last year. So it was probably something that was exploited when that was first in effect. Now, how this kind of played out is that those two cars did roll through tech. Scott McLaughlin's did not because it did crash. And the IndyCar technical director, Kevin Blanche, noticed something on Will Power's car and noted it at the time, but was not sure if it was in violation of the rules. And then Newgarden's car went through tech and had the same exact thing. And upon further clarification of the rules, while Newgarden's car was in tech, it was found that they were both in violation of the rules in terms of that being a mandated structure that cannot be altered because it is a safety structure as well. So that's why we saw the number 12 team down there frantically trying to work on that rear wing on the pit lane with angle grinders and stuff like that, which is not a good optic in front of everybody, number one. But that's ultimately why we saw that car pulled out, because the team was given an option that they could go out and qualify the cars, but they were given a warning that if they made the Fast Six, their cars were going to be automatically impounded anyways, which is standard protocol here. But if they did not, their cars would be impounded anyways as well. And the interesting quote between that from Kevin Blanche is, when we get those cars, and they will fail inspection.
This is something that has really shaken the world, like we've talked about. Many team owners have not made too many public comments about this, but from what everybody is hearing, they're furious. They're fed up that this is an ongoing issue and it's still happening. Pato O'Rourke went out yesterday after qualifying on the front row and went up on the podium and said he thought every single one of the Penske cars should be fighting in the last row shootout. Dale Coyne Racing's Jacob Abel, not in the show because he had to stay out of the race because he didn't cheat. Meanwhile, the two Penske cars that were thrown out of qualifying are going to start ahead of him while he's still back in the garage wondering about the what ifs. So there's a lot of things that are shaking up because of this. And I'm sorry that if you're hearing the background noise, they're doing dress rehearsals for the pre-race for next Sunday's race. But if I'm Dale Coyne Racing, I'm filing lawsuits, I'm filing appeals. I'm going to make sure that one of those Penske cars is not in the race and that Jacob Abel is, because the fact that both of those cars that are in there, when we all know well that if you find enough pictures from Saturday's qualifying, you're going to see that resin on those attenuators.
So, and I want to make a couple more points with that. First and foremost, it is just Will Power and Josef Newgarden that will be starting at the very back of the field as part of their penalty. They'll be starting 32nd, 33rd, and everybody else will gain a little bit of an advantage by just gaining 2 positions automatically. Now, in reference to Scott McLaughlin, he is the exception in this because of the fact that when he crashed his car, he did not have the parts in question on his car. The team did surrender over to IndyCar Tech, as well as the 2 and the 12 teams surrendered all of their rear wings over for secondary inspection, and the affected ones were taken and confiscated properly. But when Scott McLaughlin had his crash yesterday in turn 2, it had a within the rules rear wing. So because it was never proven that Scott McLaughlin has ran the fraudulent rear wings, he escaped any penalty, and he will be starting now in the 10th place position. And part of the other penalty as well is that Josef Newgarden and Will Power will lose their strategists for the race, which may sound familiar because we had the same exact situation exactly 1 year ago with Tim Cindric and Ron Rzuski both being kicked off the pit boxes. Now, we don't know for sure who is going to be replacing them, but you could probably guess that Josef Newgarden will have Jonathan Duguid back on his car. If you don't know Jonathan, he is the head of the Pensky Porsche Motorsports program. So you'd have to expect that because he is officially a Indy 500 winning strategist.
And to look forward from that, what happened back on Sunday, let's look forward to today. We did have a 2-hour session today from the Indianapolis 500 for practice. The last one before we go into Car Bay on Friday. We're going to have 3 days off. From those 2-hour sessions, a lot of pack running in those 2 hours. What did you see and what did you make of what we saw out of the pack racing that we saw today?
Yeah, so This is really the first real session where we get everybody kind of on the same accord. You have some of the teams that are in threat of being in that last row shootout majority of the time doing qualifying sims throughout the main practice week. With qualifying now in the books, everybody's now focused on race running. And we had the biggest pack that we had all month so far. We had an up to 25 car pack at one point. And the racing was very frantic in the pack, but also very respectful, which is something we will not see next Sunday for sure. But it's really just trying to get a feel for these cars, because as we've seen this year, the track conditions have been very, very tricky, and these cars have been very unstable at times through different points. We did see one incident today with Christian Rasmussen not being as lucky as he was earlier in the month, actually making contact with the wall, breaking a toe link, and spinning out and backing it into the inside wall in turn 2. Minor damage, won't require any change of chassis or anything like that, but it is going to be a longer afternoon for the ECR guys down there in that 21 camp. Now, as for some of the on-track running, the one big thing that I noticed this when we saw the smaller pack running last week, is that I think the key to this Indy 500 is going to be the small, like 2 and 3 car packs versus the one large pack, because something that's kind of concerning is that the big pack is only managing about 210 miles an hour around here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, when in race trim, these cars, if they are in a good tow, can reach up to 226. So I think those smaller packs, like we saw actually in reference to the month of May in 2008 with Dan Weldon and Scott Dixon, they were able to pull away from the rest of the field just working together and just trading the lead back and forth. And I think that might be the key to the Indy 500 this year.
And when looking at the pack running, you saw the people who are going to be strong and who are not. Some people might have been sandbagging just to wait until Sunday. From what you saw, who seems to be the front runners in the big pack race that could go out there and probably win this race next week?
I know they're shrouded in controversy right now, but the 2 affected Team Penske cars look very good in a pack. Josef Newgarden was able to just claw his way through the train of cars with ease and get to the front. Will Power did struggle a little bit, but they did make quite a few pit stops, came in and did make adjustments to the car, and it seemed to get better as the afternoon went on. Scott McLaughlin, he had a little bit of a troublesome day just trying to get to tunes with a new car he's never been in before, because if you remember back to yesterday, we did tell you guys that he was switching to Josef Newgarden's backup car, which typically is set up more for Joseph's liking versus Scott's, but that one struggled a little bit. But one big revelation, again, I can't hammer this point home enough, he has been the revelation all month, Robert Schwarzman. When he was at the front of the pack, he looked amazing. Now, why am I saying this now? Because if you remember back, all of last week, he was practicing qualifying simulations. He, at most, ran with his teammate Callum Ilott, but he never really got in a big pack. He was just focusing on qualifying, and obviously that paid off. But that part's behind. He needs to focus on race trim, and every minute is precious here because you only have 4 hours of running, which sounds like a lot, but when it comes to this place, it's not really at all.
And when looking at Robert Schwarzman as well, towards the end of practice, they focus more on doing the pit start practices, and even the Fox broadcast pointed out there are some things as a rookie that he still needs to check off the box on what he needs to be ready for this race. In the pit box, so it's an entirely new crew that hasn't been together that long. They were struggling on pit stops as well. Getting the air jack in, getting the tires on properly is also a new experience for Schwarzman. Not having to use turn 3 to get off the track, instead of having to do the hot pitting out of turn number 4 and having to go as fast as you can through turns 1 and 2 to get back up to speed. So there's going to be a lot of things that this rookie's going to have to look forward to, because the pressure of the world is already on him. He's starting on the pole for the Indianapolis 500 in his first ever attempts, and as it stands right now, he is one of the front runners that could go out there and win this race and become the first rookie to win it in almost 10 years, 9 years from when Alexander Rossi did it back in 2016.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you have a rookie driver, obviously there's always going to be teething issues. Even Rossi had teething issues back in 2016. But he does have a very good crew behind him. Obviously, the brain trust, the engineering staff is really good. His main strategist and engineer is a former Team Penske engineer that worked with Josef Newgarden. And a lot of the team is a mishmash of very experienced folks. I've seen a lot of folks that particularly worked with Chip Ganassi Racing for quite some time on both of those cars. So there's definitely a very good crew behind Callum and Robert. It's just putting all of those pieces together for a win, which is something that they haven't been able to do up to this point on the road and street courses. But for some reason, everything seems to be clicking here so far.
And as we get ready for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500, it is fair that we do look at the top 10 results from the tow speed. So let's take a look at your Monday practice results of the Indianapolis 500 practice today, courtesy of our friends over at Peak Performance.
Protect your vehicle with Peak Original Equipment Technology. Our formulas match the vehicle manufacturer's technology requirements so that we have the perfect match for every vehicle.
And looking at your top 10 from today's 2-hour Monday practice session from here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Topping the charts is a familiar face, the number 10 Chip Ganassi Racing Honda of Alex Palou. He laid down a best lap of 226.765. In second place, the number 06 car of Helio Castroneves in his Meyer Shank Racing Honda put down a 226.441. That car has been described to us as very, very good in race trim, even though they did have their struggles in qualifying. In third place, we have Takuma Sato, the man who put it on the front row yesterday with a 226.8 or 087, marking a really good positive outlook for the Ray Hall Letterman team. Fourth and fifth, once again, we see the teammates of Jack Harvey and Ryan Hunter-Ray in their dry and ride bolt entries that seem to be very much glued together, as they have been together in almost every practice and qualifying session so far. In sixth place, we have the number 6 Arrow McLaren entry of Nolan Siegel, who has successfully made his first Indianapolis 500. In seventh, we have the number 12 Team Penske Chevrolet of Will Power, and right far behind him, we have the number 2 entry of Josef Newgarden. In ninth, we have Christian Rasmussen, and we already noted the troubles for him today as he did make contact with the turn 2 wall. He will end up ninth with a 225.247. And rounding out your top 10, we have the number 76 Juncos Hollinger entry of Connor Daly. We noted last week that those Juncos cars do look very good in race trim and could pose a serious threat come race day.
And to close out the video, we have one last thing we want to touch up on, which is an ongoing developing story that has taken place throughout the month of May, and that is the ongoing issues with the hybrid system, which is new on these cars for the 2025 Indianapolis 500. This was a concern after the Grand Prix. This was a concern back during the test in April, and it's starting to rear its face again as we head closer to the Indianapolis 500. That's being issues with the hybrid system. Tell us more about what happened here today.
Yeah, so 2 cars in particular had concerns with the hybrid system and lost most of the practice time today. That being the number 9 PNC Bank Honda from Chip Ganassi Racing of Scott Dixon and the number 77 Juncos Hollinger Chevrolet of Stingray Rob. Both cars lost over half the practice session and appeared with some sort of technical issue, though we haven't had much clarification on it so far. These are the first major hybrid issues or concerns that we've seen so far in the practice and qualifying sessions for the Indianapolis 500, but it is a little bit concerning because we are getting to that critical point on Carb Day and race day where a lot of eyes are going to be on that component, because it is another thing that can break on the cars and it could influence the outcome of the race.
And with that being said, that's going to wrap up the video here today from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We have one more day of practice left before the historic and much looked forward to and anticipated 109th edition of the Indianapolis 500. Of course, brought to you all by our friends over at Peak Performance, who have supported us all month long and are going to be supporting us all summer long as we get set for an incredible summer months of the NHRA Tours. So if you want to stay up to date, be sure to subscribe to the channel down below and comment with your thoughts on the Pensky penalties and who you think are the front runners for the 500. And while you're down there, go check out our friends at Peak Performance and go join the Peak Squad so you can join their mailing list and get all the behind the scenes stuff that they have been recording back in Chicago and that they record all year long with their other sponsored affiliates, as well as us here at Mighty Mac, as we have behind the scenes content that we send to them throughout the month as well. Be sure to follow me on all social media pages down below, Mighty Mac on through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And until the wacky and crazy day that is known as Carb Day, this was Mighty Mac. We'll see you next time.